the way our brains are wired is we have this filtering of information. We've talked about this before.
We have.
Of what we choose to pay attention to, what reinforces the narrative we tell ourselves. And recognizing that can be very freeing because then it helps us to see what are those patterns of the stories we tell ourselves that keep us stuck.
Because the inner critic is very subjective.
It is.
The inner critic is not objective at all.
No, but it feels objective because you can always find evidence for why you're criticizing yourself.
That's true. The data's all there. I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so we're giggling because I said to Mary that this chapter, do you remember Miss Piggy when she would go, pour moi? I feel that every chapter is pour moi. And then Mary said, well, really, it's her chapter. Every chapter is her chapter. And I said, so this is an autobiography?
It totally
in
is.
code?
That's right.
And she's admitting it. She's actually like coming clean today.
Well, listen, I did say it took me 10 years to write this book because I had to live life. And then I realized, oh, crap, I got to grow in all these areas. So, yeah.
Okay.
Every chapter hits us in the solar plexus.
Yes. So this chapter is called The Stories We Tell Ourselves. And I think this could be my mantra. If only.
If only.
How many times have I said that to myself?
I don't know.
If only.
If only.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one that says, oh, if only, right? And then ...
Tell me more.
Oh,
Tell me one of your if onlys.
Well, it's all internal narrative.
Yeah.
That if you got inside that brain of mine and you heard all the if onlys, it would bend your brain. You'd have to write a whole other book.
I'm going to call this Jillian's If Only Mind Bender book.
So, well, because my inner critic is so strong, and we've already identified that to you listeners and readers, that we have strong inner critics.
Yeah.
So the if only plays a constant reel in the background.
Constant. Oh, I bump up against that all the time.
I know.
But I bump against it in myself as well. So this whole chapter about the stories we tell ourselves is, first of all, the recognition that there is absolutely no such thing as true objectivity.
Ugh.
And I think it's freeing to recognize that.
Well, possibly.
It is, because no matter what, the way our brains are wired is we have this filtering of information. We've talked about this before.
We have.
Of what we choose to pay attention to, what reinforces the narrative we tell ourselves. And recognizing that can be very freeing because then it helps us to see what are those patterns of the stories we tell ourselves that keep us stuck.
Because the inner critic is very subjective.
It is.
The inner critic is not objective at all.
No, but it feels objective because you can always find evidence for why you're criticizing yourself.
That's true. The data's all there.
The data is all there. So that's the thing is when we can recognize how biased our brains are, that we do filter out information. Now, remember, we're back to the old Stone Age brain.
Yeah.
And by the way, I so appreciated your acting out of the Stone Age brain.
Oh my gosh.
When I leave her alone, that's what happens. There's some other funny ones coming too, apparently. So
That
anyway,
I can't remember.
No, you can't remember.
No.
But anyway, recognizing that everything goes through the filter of us. Like repeat that to yourself. Everything goes through the filter of me. Right? So then everything has the flavor of our history. Like I know people like to think that our memories are like perfect and exact, and it's like a recording, but it's affected not just by what we were thinking at the time, what stuck out to us, especially emotionally, what we were told about it.
Right.
We pick up narratives from our parents that we don't even know we're carrying.
Yeah.
Because it's just been so much a background of just the things that we've been taught or believed.
Oh, yeah.
So that is something that's huge. So that's the first sort of like truth to face about ourselves, is that there is no true 100% objectivity, that everything goes through the filter of me.
Right. So these dang biases are always at play in our lives.
Yeah.
And I do like that phrase, everything goes through the filter of me, because it reminds me that not only do I have filters and biases, but everybody around me does
Yes.
too.
Yes.
So if I walk into the family Christmas gathering, I know that everybody in the room has their own biases and their own filters, and everything's going through their filters as well.
Yeah.
Right? That's mind-blowing in itself. It's also very freeing.
Yeah. Well, that's key, because then a lot of times what we experience as broken trust
Yeah.
from the previous chapter that we talked about can just simply be a mismatch of filters. And so they didn't realize that they did something that was being interpreted by you in a way that was hurtful.
Right. Well, I told you in the previous podcast about Bruce saying something that bugged me. He doesn't even remember saying it.
That's right. That's
But
right.
it's stuck in my inner critic loop. So you talk about these 4 different kinds of biases, and I picked my favorite.
Did I say 4? I think there's like 700 of them.
Oh, well, you choose 4 in the book.
Those are the 4 that are my favorite.
Oh, dang. There's 700?
Well, something like that. I did a Google search of how many biases are there. It might be 400, but there's a lot. So I only picked a few, and I picked my favorite.
Okay, well, I picked my favorite,
You might need to Google and figure out which ones are, you might have. Oh, you have some.
Oh, I have more.
Tell me your favorites.
Well, my favorite is the actor-observer bias.
Oh, I like that one too.
I know. And so now I have to go through 400 other biases to see what other ones I'm lugging around with me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's your homework for next time.
Oh, Lord. No. But, you're killing me, because I know it's based in science, but our internal biases don't like to know that there's truth to them.
I know, because it's very comfortable.
Oh, truly.
So when we talked about our shadow self,
Yes.
part of what our shadow self really likes is our internal narratives that protect that shadow self.
Right.
And that continue to hide us from the truth of who we are. I mean, the thing is, too, when we talk about our essential self, I hope you got that the intent was never about the perfect self, because it's accepting our humanity and our brokenness and I use the word brokenness a little too much because it sounds broken.
It's messiness.
Messiness. I like that.
Messiness sounds a lot better.
Yes, because we are human, we are messy. And so recognizing that we have biases and we have filters is super, super, super important, because that's where miscommunication happens. But that's also where we can check with each other. So you checked with Bruce, and Bruce was able to go, I said that. And obviously he didn't intend offense. And so then you're able to work it through and by saying, well, please don't say that again. And also, he didn't really mean it, and let it go.
But he didn't even know he said it. So,
So how can he even remember it?
So, I mean, I do think, I say this about every stinking chapter, because...
Hey, what's with the stinking? That's her bias coming through.
That's true. It's true. Whenever I'm being poked, it's a stinking chapter.
Yes.
Okay. So I think for me, this is one of the most challenging chapters. And I say that about every chapter because this is what you write. Mary, Dr. Mary, you wrote this. Can you see how essential it is to deal with the lies, the denial, the wrong filters, and the narratives you've told yourself?
Right. I know.
Like, that's a lot of unpacking to do.
I think that when you're in pain, it's being able to discern what's pain that is because of situations you have no control over, like you're going through a loss of a job or financial issues, whatever it is, and what pain you're experiencing because of your wrong beliefs. And I think a lot of the pain that we experience is because of wrong beliefs. That we have about ourselves, about others, about God. If you have faith, like all of those things affect greatly how we experience life. So the good news of that, as I always say, is if I recognize the part that I'm playing in the pain that I'm experiencing, then I can actually do something about it. Right. And it's not being like in denial, because it's one of my favorite biases. But it's actually facing the reality that it is my perception that's causing me the pain. So I don't know how many times I've been hurt by a friend or by, a family member, and I realize it's my own issue.
Yes.
And that's a really great place to start, because then I can self-soothe. I can kind of work through it. I can understand it. But the other really key thing, and that goes back to the vulnerability and trust building, is I can go back to the other person and say, you know, when you do this particular thing or say this particular thing, it triggers this response in me. And it's not their fault. It's not their responsibility. But because I'm telling them, out of love for me, they can be more sensitive to knowing that that's a soft spot for me.
Well, the other thing too is that even if they can't adjust, right? Even
True.
if they just blurt out,
Right.
at least they have an awareness of where your tender spots are and have an understanding of maybe how you have reacted. So for my husband and I, if I can tell him, you know, oh, when you say these things, like, okay, we do this all the time. So he does this. He goes, Jillian, like that. And he doesn't realize that it sounds to me like a scolding voice.
Yeah.
I'm getting scolded. And like, it's usually something he's doing he's put himself in some kind of situation, but no, it's my fault. Like on the stupid muddy bike trail where he's stuck in the mud. He's about to fall. He's like, Jillian? And I was laughing because there's nothing I could do about it. And actually, I kind of wanted to see him fall in the mud.
Oh, gosh.
No, because I wanted him to realize, like, he'd put himself in the situation. It wasn't anything to do with me.
Right.
But I think when he can hear, when you say that, this is what it sounds like to me, and it's not pleasant.
Right.
And so I'm going to feel prickly about it afterwards because I'm going to feel like I just got scolded. And I don't want to feel like that.
Well, then that's the two parts.
Yeah.
It's the recognizing that he's doing something that is causing you to feel prickly, so that hopefully he can start to shift. But again, you have no control over that.
No.
So it's being able to let go of that. And how many times am I going to repeat behavior I want changed in another person? Wasn't there an episode last season where he talked about the impossibility of changing other people?
Yes.
So
It was.
this filter thing is, yes, we have a responsibility to be honest with people in our life.
Right.
But we don't have a responsibility or control over them changing.
That's right.
And that's absolutely critical. So this whole journey of transformation is not about transforming others, much as we'd like them to be. Like, I'm sure if, I'd like to give the book to a bunch of people.
Good. Highlight it.
Highlight it.
When you see the pink highlight, that's for you. When you see the yellow highlight, that's for me.
That's right. So it's being able to, again, this is about taking ownership so that you know it's an ouchie for you, and you getting prickly and he's clueless about it. How helpful is it for you at the end of the day?
It's not. And that's why I'm laughing now.
Yes, exactly.
That's why I'm starting to laugh.
Yeah.
So the hopeful thing about this chapter is that we can, and I do emphasize can in capitals, change our stories.
Yeah.
So the story I tell myself when he says, Jillian, is that I'm being scolded.
Right.
Whereas really, it might be his cry for help because he's put himself in
Or he's embarrassed.
Maybe.
Or who knows?
Or he's going to fall in the mud.
Yeah. And he's anxious.
So I can tell myself a different story, and I can do the rewiring that my brain needs to tell myself a different story moving forward. That's the good part.
Yes. I was just, I was around a mother with a child. And the child was acting out in a normal, typical way, like nothing bad. He was just being like a young kid. And the mom looked at me, and I could tell that she was embarrassed. And so her intensity increased, and she was trying to shush him. And it came across as being very critical of the child, which perpetuates any, him going into hiding and all that. But I knew it was because she felt embarrassed and she was feeling shame. And that was her filter, is that I am a bad mom if my child acts up.
Yes.
And so like seeing that was kind of like, oh, I remember those days when I was raising the kids, and how often some of my worst moments as a parent was actually more my issues of feeling like I was a bad parent. Right. So when you recognize your filters, it helps you to kind of go, I can stop this action or behavior or reaction because I realize that that's not actually true. I actually felt a lot of empathy for the child and the mom.
Yeah.
Because I've been there.
Oh, yeah.
And you can try to control your kid, but you can't control your kid. And you can try to like get them to behave, but like, you know, there's things that happen. And so the belief that somehow I'm a bad mother because my child is misbehaving is just something you just got to lay down, right?
Yeah. So can I tell you a little funny story?
Yeah.
This is not about my kids.
Okay.
Okay. But this is about one of my dogs.
Okay.
So we used to have this dog. Her name was Rose. She was a dog in training for dog guides. And she's a beautiful yellow Labrador retriever. Her name was Rose. That should give you the first clue. She could fart like there was no tomorrow.
Yeah, I've smelt it.
And I wore turtlenecks for a year because I'd just be like this. And I'd be in the office, she'd be with me, and all of a sudden, a silent but deadly would hit the room. And I'd be so embarrassed.
Right.
But she was also a triple P, a public place pooper.
Oh.
So I remember going to Yorkdale, of all places, fancy mall in Toronto, high-end stores. Walked her outside for 45 minutes.
Nothing.
Nothing. She was sniffing nothing. We get inside the store. We're right outside of Holt Renfrew.
Oh, gosh.
And someone calls me, Jillian. And I look behind me. There's a load.
Steaming
She's
load.
just stopped and dropped. And I felt like the worst dog owner in the whole world. Right. But I have no control over her pooper.
Yes. Yes.
I tried my best.
I remember walking into your office. I'm like, Jillian.
I know. Exactly. It wasn't me. It was the dog. I promise. But yeah, I mean, I just like, that's a silly little example.
Yes.
But I took on that I must be the worst puppy raiser for dog guides in the history of Canada because my dog was the triple P. And that's just what she did for a while.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's actually a funny but also good example because it doesn't, I mean, I don't know how embarrassed you were, but like.
I was pretty embarrassed.
Okay, yes. But it just goes to show how our internal narrative can change things and our perceptions. So, you know, think about that. I mean, I think that's the importance is recognizing, number one, that you do have always the filter of you. But number two, like, what are those filters? And I list a bunch in the book. Google them if you want to find all 400 or however many there are. But also recognize the actual stories you tell yourself, about others, about your life, about your relationships. That is really, really key. So I have over apologized to my kids many, many times for my mistakes as a parent, to the point where my daughter has said, Mom, you like way overcorrect all the time. And so the narrative that I had to shift in my head was that I was a bad mother and I made too many mistakes and I screwed them up. And I had to change it to like, I'm a good mother, which is a really hard thing to say.
It is a hard thing to say.
I'm a good mother who made mistakes, but I love my kids. And it's like that intentionality around shifting that filter has helped me be much less defensive with them. Much more open to feedback from them for ways that I can change. And also receptive to when they appreciate me instead of just poo-pawing it.
Yes.
Like I feel our relationship is more authentic as a result because I'm able to recognize that that filter was preventing me from having that authentic connection with my adult kids.
Yeah.
So for me,
that's gold,
huge.
Mary.
Yeah.
That's so hopeful for many parents out there too. Because I don't think there's a mom that I've come across in my many years of working with a lot of moms who have thought they were good mothers.
I know. So, so that's the work. Recognize that it all goes through the filter of you. Kind of read through some of the filters. You'll see in the digging deeper questions, there's quite a few around you think about how you might have some wrong narratives going on and how you can identify them.
Yeah.
The other thing I would encourage you to do is give permission to people in your life who your RB, Rebecoming group, people you trust who can see it a mile away.
Yes.
And can then throw what did you want? A Nerf gun.
Nerf gun. Shoot you with a Nerf gun.
Shoot you with a Nerf gun.
Kick you in the butt.
Kick you in the butt. Because you know what? It is a Nerf gun shot in love. Because we don't want you to feel pain over believing lies or false narratives. That is just the worst kind of pain to have because
That's
it's
right.
so entrenched,
Yeah.
and it doesn't allow you to receive the truth of the really wonderful things about you, the wonderful things about your life, your relationships, the people who love you, all of those things.
So the power of the boop.
Yes, I know.
Okay, so in dog world, the boop is the boop in the dog's nose, right?
Right.
But this is a different boop.
Yes, this is from the show Shrinking from Apple TV, which season 2 has just released, and it is funny. It is all sorts of wrong from a therapy standpoint.
Yeah.
But without giving away the whole story, one of the therapists talks about the boop, and he was working with a client who had lots of negative internal narratives. And it actually, even in season 2, she shows up again. It's pretty hilarious how she shows up, actually. And I won't give that away too, but it's just a little boops that she had to make to change her behavior and her belief system and how she responded. And so sometimes it feels like impossible to change things.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, even for me, doing the shift from being a bad mom to a good mom, that took a lot of work and a lot of years and a lot of conversation. So it's not an overnight thing, but there's hope as you continue to make those boops forward, the baby steps forward. So,
And I think that that's part of our internal narrative that has been screwed up by the quick fix, the 21-day detox, the 5-day flush, the 30-day diet plan. We've been sold a bill of goods that is no good.
Right.
Because we've been told that fixes can happen very quickly.
Yeah.
And they can't. Like, I love that the power of the boop is incremental changes, little boops over time that lead to bigger changes.
That's right.
Because that's the truth of the matter. That's the science behind all habitual change, is it does take incremental change repeated over time to get to great change. So for you to say it took you many years to make that shift from being the bad mom to I'm a good mom, that's very freeing for many of our listeners and viewers, because we put so much pressure on ourselves to fix it quickly.
Yes. Well, that's what clients do. Well, tell me what to do.
Yep.
And
Give me
they
the 3
expect
steps.
it by next session that they'll have resolved it.
I spent $250 on this session. Give it to me now.
Give it to me now. And somehow it's going to just work. And I always say, if I could wave a magic wand, I would. But then actually I wouldn't, because part of the journey of growth is the boops and the little steps. And it becomes, from a science standpoint, you are rewiring your brain, and those changes and those habitual patterns are shifting, and then they do become ingrained in healthier patterns that you have. So it's so worth it. And so this is one of the areas of not just changing my external behaviors, because if I don't change my internal narrative, the reactive behaviors are still going to come out.
Yes.
So you can only do so much by just sheer self-control. You have to be able to shift the internal narrative, because that's the thing. That's the hidden loogie that is causing some of the reactive, self-protective types of behavior.
So one of the things that I would be just cautious about is, you write in the book, for some of us, thinking about who we want to be is hard.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you read that.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to read it again.
Okay.
For some of us, thinking about who we want to be is hard. And I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people, that statement, because who we want to be and the story we've told ourselves about who we are seem so polar opposite. And some might think, I'm too old.
It's too late.
It's too late. The ship has sailed. My kids are in their 40s. How can I go back and do the work of being the good mom now? Like, I have 40 years of bad momming in my brain. But that's such a lie, isn't it?
Yeah. It's never too late.
No.
Yeah.
But it sometimes lets us off the hook if we think that.
Well, let me just clarify. It sometimes can be too late to repair certain things in our life, but it's never too late for us to grow through and come to acceptance, self-forgiveness, self-compassion, changed behaviors and responses. It's never too late for that. Sometimes patterns have been set for so long that we can't go back and repair that relationship. The other person may not be willing to.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you can't shift in yourself too.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, that this is hopeful for you, the taking the little baby steps, and recognizing that's from the inside out, recognizing the internal narratives that need to change. So, yeah. Oh, another one of those. Why do we do this? Why do we do this to ourselves? Why am I doing
this? This is your autobiography, my friend. I'm just digging into it along with you.
Oh, gosh. Well, thanks for tuning in and for listening and for hanging in there.
And if you don't know what a loogie is, you might have to Google it. Google the loogie.
Okay, there you go. Oh, thanks for tuning in. Take care.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Fully Lived Life podcast. We hope you found it encouraging and helpful. Be sure to follow or subscribe so that you never miss a new episode. And if you enjoyed our show, please help spread the word by sharing with your friends and family and posting on your social media. Thanks for listening, and tune in to our next episode.